Welcome back to episode 154 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. Today, I'm joined by two-time NCAA champ, four-time NCAA finalist, two-time national team member, Isaiah Martinez. Isaiah, what's happening?
Nothing much, man. How's it going?
Good, man. It's good to see you. How's everything out in Champaign?
It's getting weird in this being quarantined for about a month now, and so it's I called it Quarantineville yesterday when I was doing an Instagram live, and that's kind of what I feel like. It's like I'm in my own like little town and like own little world with this quarantine going on, and it's getting a little wacky for me. Just trying to find ways to stay like engaged.
So initially, was it kind of like, in some ways, I think a lot of people have found it refreshing, right? It's like, oh, I can step back, I can breathe a little bit, I can collect my thoughts, but when you're alone with your thoughts for too long, I mean, it kind of drives you crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you're like thinking, okay, it's a relief to finally get that time to think, and then once you get that time to think, you're like you make the decisions on the things you want to do, but with the circumstances, you can't go do anything right now, right? So like you're like you think about things you want to do, and then you can't do those wants, and so like those kind of drive you crazy. Like, yeah, it is nice to think for a second, but then also you can't really even act on it right now.
Yeah, that's what I was about. What I was going to say. Like, you're a person of action. As a high-level athlete, you need to act. It's a one thing to think about everything that you want to get out and how you want to, incorporate different things into your training, into your wrestling, into your competition. But you actually need that outlet to release all those things.
Yeah, I think the one thing I miss the most is just kind of the structure of like everyday life. Like it is, yeah, like I said, it is nice to be home and kind of hang out, but you kind of crave, as an athlete, you kind of crave that structure a little bit.
Well, I know with all high level athletes, most athletes in general, they have a structure and routine that they approach every day, and that structure is necessary. Like to know what you're looking for and knowing what your plan is every day, that's how you're making progress, because you're following certain things, and then the reference points after the week or after the day, you reflect on them and say, okay, this is where I need to make improvements. This is where I need to dial in my training. I need to shift my focus. But when you can't do that, it kind of puts you off the routine that you've had for 6, 7, 8 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, just like the familiarity now, like the decision-making process now is just like you're kind of just making it up as you go, right? Like I've been doing a lot of things around the house though, with Illinois being probably most likely going to extend the stay-at-home order for another month. I was over it, so I went to Walmart, started buying a lot more exercise equipment, some like, what are they? They're like the workout mats. They're like not like wrestling mats, but they're the ones they put on in the weight room.
Yeah.
And I like piled 2 of those together. I'm like, okay, now I since I have to be here for another month, like I have to commit to working out, like at a high level at my house, right? For this past month, I've been working out at my house, but like it wasn't with the intensity that I would do like in a wrestling room, because I figured we're gonna get out of this and then we're gonna be able to wrestle soon. Now we're in this for another month, so now my not intensity, I guess, just like my focus and my type of workouts are gonna ramp up in my own household, right? And Anissa, my fiance, I actually laid down the mats yesterday and started doing stance in motion and different things like that, and actually trying to work out as hard as I can. And I was causing so much noise in our house that she was like checking on me like every 5 minutes, because she's like, you're gonna put a hole in the wall or something, you're gonna drop something, and don't break my table. And so it was just funny yesterday. She's gonna have to get used to like all that noise, because up to yesterday, or prior to yesterday, I was working out in my garage, right, which is just concrete floors, and I was jump roping and doing Bulgarian bags. But I was doing almost too much jump roping that I hurt my shoulder. Like I started tweaking my shoulder, and I was like,
I've never heard of a jump rope injury, an injury by jump rope.
So I get impingements in my shoulder a lot. Just, I'm pretty left side dominant, and I just, for whatever reason, I aggravated my shoulder, and I'm like, it has to be from that jump rope because I haven't had any contact all month.
What did you ask Anissa to jump in with you? Say, hey, you can jump in and give me a go.
Actually, that's really funny. Yesterday, so right towards the end, I was, kind of thinking about like elbow control and like my grip on how I want to put my hands. And I was like, I yelled her name. I was like, get over, Anissa, get over here. I need your help. And she's like, she comes over. She's like, what do you need? I'm like, give me a collar tie. And I'm like, and she's like, okay. And she's never, she wasn't around wrestling until we met, right? And so she doesn't quite get it yet. She's getting a lot better. I'm talking to her a lot more about wrestling. But so she grabs this collar tie, and I'm like, don't just put your hand on me. I need you to like lean your weight on me. And I'm like grabbing in, like readjusting my grip. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm visualizing. I'm trying to think my way through a position real quick. And she's like, you're so weird. I'm like, you're actually helping me. I'm not just trying to mess with you. And so I thought that was super funny. I made her eventually like kind of understand what I was doing, and she's starting to get it. So if I'm gonna need a drilling partner in the future, I'm gonna have to rely on her a little bit more.
Nice. So going back to your mind, there is a power of the mind. Like sometimes I think as athletes, we get just conditioned to let our body take over. And you have to, once you get into live competition, thinking is not necessarily the best thing. But in moments like this, has there been some benefits by just digging into the resources of your mind?
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of, if you could learn to keep yourself occupied and in a positive way, that's kind of what I try to do, right? It's when you start thinking of how I have so much time, and what am I going to do with my time, and you start getting lazy. Should I go play video games? Should I go do this stuff? One of the things that I've been really, really working on, and like I told myself I wanted to do this, is like, okay, well, going into this quarantine, I want to not play like video games, not waste time in that way, right? If I'm gonna be lazy and waste time, I'm not gonna do it being in front of a screen. And so far, I've been doing a really good job, and it's actually, it's like a small victory, And I don't play video games all that often, but I could definitely waste some time in front of a screen, 1 day, 2 days a week. So that's like finding those small victories have been like increasingly important, right? Getting up for a workout, even though the conditions aren't ideal, right? And you don't feel great after the workout, not because it was so hard and you're so tired. You don't feel great because you don't feel like it was a good workout, because you can only do so much in like a home setting. And I live in like a single family home. It's pretty small area. So my space is kind of limited, but doing that and being able to recognize that you did it even though it was unideal and it is still good for you is good for your body because you're still working out, and 2, good for your mind because you're still keeping it working, you're still doing those things.
Yeah, because I think confidence is directly proportional to the level of discipline you live your life with, right? And a lot of times our discipline comes with our training, like how hard you push your body. Well, you don't have that available to you. So, how can you discipline your mind in other ways to gain confidence? Like even that, I mean, you made it sound like it's a trivial thing, but you're disciplining your mind. Like, no, I want to do something. I want a release. I want to jump online and game and because it takes you away from the world. But by staying away from that, no, you've disciplined yourself, and therefore you've kind of instilled a little small level of confidence in yourself, right?
For sure. It's just, it's just holding yourself accountable when the whole world is going kind of crazy, and like you could find 100,000 different excuses to not hold yourself accountable. You're still trying to hold yourself somewhat accountable and still find those small victories. And I think that's tremendously important.
Yeah, and I think, these are the cliches that we talk about in sports a lot, like visualizing your opponents and what they're doing, while you're laying in bed. It's the old Dan Gable things, quote. And I'm thinking about this, like how every athlete's in quarantine. And I know there's got to be a competitive application to this time in isolation. Like, I'm going to do more than this guy, and I'm going to be more disciplined. I'm going to figure out a way to get something out of this. So I'm going to be better. Yeah, I'll be behind the eight ball a little bit, slightly in some areas, but I can make gains and get ahead in other areas. And if I can discipline myself to do that, I'm going to gain on my competition. And I know that everybody's thinking that. Like, how am I going to get an advantage on my competition right now?
Yeah, that's kind of funny that you said that. I was talking to, our guys here at Illinois, and like, kind of my thoughts on, the future of with this whole situation and how they could turn this into a positive. I my rational mind says, okay, it's a win if you could just stay at a similar shape level as when you left, right? Like, I don't think anyone is going to make those gains physically right now. Like, you may believe so, but like, unless you're like able to get into a real full facility and have people around you and different partners, physically it's going to be very difficult to make significant gains. But one of the areas that you can make gains is your mind, right? Studying, learning the patterns of your opponents. Like, we did a Zoom call the other day with the whole team, and Barry Davis came on, and he was, Barry is so much energy. He's like bouncing off the walls, going everywhere. And I think it kind of took our guys back a little bit, because he's like, okay, Justin Cardani, name the top 10 guys at your weight class right now, right? Like, he's like, are you guys playing video games? Who are your opponents? Do you know them by order? Do you know their favorite move? Do you know what they're doing, right? How do you know how you're going to score on them? And he was like very, very adamant about, during this time, constantly thinking about wrestling in that way. Think about who you're going to wrestle. And that's in a sort kind of a visualization, right? You're thinking about who you're wrestling. You're thinking about the moves they do. You're thinking about the moves you do. And I was like, that's where you're going to get the most benefit out of this. You have the time to watch film and study wrestling. Maybe not try wrestling, but to write it down, think about it, process the information, and have all these things in your head saved for you when we return. And it just makes you more excited to come back and get that work in and to get better. So, like I said, physically, it's best case scenario if you could kind of just stay in a similar shape, and it'll be even better mentally if you could just have so much more knowledge and hunger for the sport when you return.
Yeah, because it's about, so as you're breaking your guys down, have you been, I know the one thing with Coach Medlin, he's always challenging you mentally in different ways. Like, talk about that a little bit, because I know just being out there a couple months ago, he was throwing some different things at you. As you're under physical duress, he'll throw things out to you that are mentally challenging, that you've got to stay physically engaged, but also solve a problem mentally. And I know it's a fun game that you guys have played, but has there been any practical application from the lessons he's taught you in the last year in this time when you're quarantined?
He's been, just in general, Coach Medlin is a great guy. He's a great coach, and he's been instrumental to my development in freestyle. And, like you said, yeah, he tries to challenge me mentally, and sometimes it's him just messing with me just to test my resilience. Like you said, like you brought that up, like him asking me like a math question when we're doing a sprint workout, and I'm like dying. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm not going to do math right now. He's like, what's the answer? He's like, you got to keep your mind working. You got to know these things. And I know it seems kind of strange, but the idea behind it is really solid, right? And so, yeah, I talk to him like every other day, right? And so we keep up, our communication, and he's kind of talking to me about how to stay solid in this kind of time, right? when it was less serious, I was going to his house more and more. But as, you know, the restrictions tightened up, I was, you know, he lives about an hour away. So the travel kind of got in the way of me actually going to see him during the last couple of weeks. So that's been a bummer. But yeah, Medlin is great. And yeah, it's because I think he does those things that, you know, I'm able to respond well to this quarantine a little bit. I mean, he definitely helped.
Now, let me talk to you about this, because you've also in the past year you jumped on staff. You've been on staff with Illinois and been coaching. How's that experience actually helped your wrestling? Because every athlete that I've talked to, when they start getting into coaching, or I think that's by and large the nature of senior level wrestling, you're around a program and younger guys, and so you can start passing along some of your wisdom. And I know being a coach or being an athlete, a lot of times your focus is on yourself, but having the outlet to focus on others, how has that helped your wrestling?
I mean, man, there's tons of ways. I think the one that jumps right off, you know, in my mind right now is, you know, you get to help these guys, you know, seize an opportunity and like actualize their like desire to be good in the sport and accomplish their goals, right? In the same way that it was given to me. And and that's probably one of the biggest reasons why, you know, I am on staff and I want to coach is, you know, I want to provide that knowledge and information and an opportunity and connection that was offered to me and that helped me along the way when I was wrestling, right? Especially in college. That connection to your athlete is instrumental in their development and them actualizing how good they can actually be, right? Like I look at a kid a lot of times and most of the time they don't even know how good they really are and how good they really can be. And as you know, I'm as a volunteer assistant, right? I don't have much of the day-to-day responsibility, so I'm mostly just in the room, you know, messing with the guys and like, hey, maybe you should put your hands here or there, or like I'll talk to them after they lose or before they go out there, right? That's kind of one of the big things that I try to stress is the, you know, the mental game, the mental approach, right? How are you feeling before you step out there? How do you feel about your losses? Why like getting them to think deeply about their wrestling is very important to me, because that's something that I do, right? I think about my wrestling. I think about wrestling in general, and I think that's really important because a lot of guys, you know, wrestling's really hard, and it's tough to think about it a lot if things aren't going right for you, right? And so it's, you know, it's really crucial for me to, you know, stress that idea to these guys is, you know, think about wrestling. You got to think about your wrestling, and you got to think about it in a positive way, and it's going to help you. Like think and like know your enemy, right? Like know your opponents, know what they do. You know, these are the kind of things that I think are some really important when it comes to like getting better in college, right? Thinking more about your wrestling, not just doing what the coach tells you. Like learning to be a little more independent and, you know, take control of your wrestling. How do you want to wrestle? What makes you proud of the way you wrestle? And so those are kind of the things that I try to stress to my guys on the day to day.
And so when you're getting into the mind of these athletes and getting in tune with their struggles and their challenges, how has that informed you? How has that informed your wrestling or helped elevate your game in some ways?
Yeah, you know, because I'm still an athlete and I have the aspirations to be the best in the world. When I tell my guys stuff, I have to be accountable to what I tell them, right? Because I try to reference, you know, how I would think about things when I was their age or how they're feeling and what's going on in their mind, right? It would be very difficult for me to respect what someone says if they at some point didn't hold themselves accountable to the same standard, right? And maybe that's not all the way correct, but you know, it's just kind of how wrestlers think, right? Like if someone tells you to do something, like you have to be or be a certain way, like you want to be an example of that, right? They need to see what's the benefit of this? And so when I tell my guys something, I also have to be accountable in that same way, right? I have to be an example of what I'm trying to tell them, right? And it just holds me more accountable. And one, it just makes me think about wrestling more, which is never a bad thing.
Yeah. So now I actually wanted to start jumping into your wrestling and really, I know when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, when all this stuff was starting to come out, I'm like, man, for me, thinking about you, I'm like, this is a scary prospect that you get another year to develop. Everybody obviously is very aware of your collegiate career, but then what you've done in the last 2 years, being in Final X, pushing Burroughs to the limit. The one thing that I was thinking about like how much you've closed the gap in 2 years and the prospect of giving you another year to actually develop and master all these things that you've been working on. I think that's a scary prospect for the rest of the world. Not just the country, the rest of the world.
Yeah, man, I like we haven't even really talked or like touched on that topic yet, but I was feeling great going in leading up to the trials, right? Like there's just a certain feeling you get when things are going right and and you're feeling confident and you've done things right. It's like everything's ramping up like and it's like bubbling. This feeling is like bubbling, and it's not fear or anxiety, which would be bad. It's excitement and like joy, and like you just can't wait to get out there. And that's kind of how I was feeling, right? That's kind of how I felt before the Final X last year, right? I completely believed I was going to win, and like it was just I was ready. I was near my peak, and things were going well. And it was a bummer when it got pushed back, but I think I took a second to just kind of relax. It took me a little while to get over like that feeling, that energy that I had, that momentum, and it just halting. But I just relaxed, thought about it a little bit. The opportunity is not gone; it just kind of got moved. So the dream is not gone. The pursuit is still there, and it's good because if there's been any indication of my trajectory, it's that the more time I get in freestyle, the better I'm going to be. And right. And not to, talk too much about my opponents, but, they're getting older too. And, I'm older than some of my opponents, but I'm still I feel like I'm still pretty young, and that also plays to my advantage.
No, and the one thing that I took away after we were out there with you a couple months ago, I came back and I was talking to Jesse, the president of the company, and he's like, how'd it go? I'm like, there's absolute belief. Every second I look into Isaiah's eyes, there's absolute belief that he is going to make this team. There is no doubt in his mind. And I think that's the biggest thing, because you see different guys at different stages. Let's be honest, there's some guys that are competing and will compete in the Olympic trials that don't have that level of belief. They want to see what they can do, but that's a big distinction between believing you can do it and wanting to do it, right? And that was my takeaway, a couple months ago, looking in your eyes. I'm like, there's no doubt in this guy's mind or heart. Like, there's complete belief. Like, this is going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you. But yeah, I felt so good. I wanted it. And I did the things that I needed to do, and I spent a month in Russia again, and I learned, and I stayed patient, and I trained in unideal situations and things like that, and challenged myself. Right? I didn't stay comfortable. I'm like continuing to learn and grow, and you're right. I just believed that I was going to do it, and I felt like I just never felt like that. I mean, I say that every time, right? When you perform good, like you're like, I felt amazing, but like with it being the Olympic trials, it just felt special. Like this was something that was made for me, and I'm sure many athletes feel that way. Like they get that sense of belief, like it's just meant to be, like this is meant to be. You could just feel it within yourself. And you know, if I'm sure there's a way to like explain how you get there, but it just, I think that's where you want to be as an athlete leading up to an event. Like there's not fear and anxiety. Obviously there's a little bit before you step out there, right? But no fear, anxiety, just pure excitement, and just, you know, you're so eager and you can't wait to get out there. That's where I was at, and that's where I want to be in the future, right? And that's kind of where I'm aiming to be. That's been a big thing with my wrestling, you know, in the past year, is the way I feel about wrestling, right? I've kind of learned not to get nervous anymore again, right? Like, so when I was younger, I wouldn't get nervous. I would just go out there and just be so hungry and excited to wrestle, right? As I started winning more, sometimes I would get nervous, and there was sometimes a sense of loss, which would cause anxiety and things like that. And I had to re-establish that like way to get to that feeling after I was done with college. And it's done tremendous things for my wrestling. I was there. I was just so excited. I believe that I was going to do it, and this was mine for the taking.
Well, I think when I think about belief, I think there's different levels. Like you ascend to different levels of belief, and you know, some people talk about embrace the process. You know, for me, it's like embracing different levels of belief, and in order to do that, to get to that next level of belief, typically that comes by achieving some level of accomplishment. Like before you can become an NCAA champ, typically you've got to become a state champ. And once you achieve that state championship, oh, I can believe this. I believed it. I did it. Now I set my sights on the next level of belief, and that's an NCAA champion. And you did that. And once you achieve that, you ascend to a different level of belief. And now I think at the senior level, when you're trying to be a world and Olympic champ, you've kind of got to challenge yourself and push yourself in different areas. Like like you said, you spent a month in Russia. Yeah, obviously the wrestling opportunity was amazing and what you learned, but you put yourself in the most pressure-packed, stressful situations to ascend to a different level, right? Because most people think, oh, you're going to Russia. Most people have this thing like anytime you're traveling outside the country, it's a really cool thing. But once you do that, you figure out pretty quickly, it's like, no, we got it really, really good back home. And for me to sacrifice this for a month in one of the harshest places in the world, it's got to do something for you.
No, man. No, most people have no idea how different it is. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I try to shift my focus now at the senior level to not just, you know, winning a gold medal, right? My goal is to be the best, to be the best in the world, to be the best. That's kind of what I want. And that's where my mind's at, you know, and part of being the best in the world is going and winning those matches and winning those medals, right? Shifting my focus from just trying to, you know, make a team or win a medal, win a gold medal, to being the best in the world has kind of opened my mind up to continue learning, right? And like you said, there's like levels of belief, and I think one of the most important things is understanding yourself and understanding the things that make you believe, right? And I think it's different for every person. Like, what makes you believe in yourself, right? For me, it's, you know, watching a lot of wrestling, thinking about, you know, what do I want to do? You know, where do I want to be? And like, I like over time, you do that with so much repetition that it becomes like an instinct in your brain. Like, and yeah, it's easy to believe when you've done it 1,000 times and you kind of, at first you question it, but at the 1,000th time, it's like, it's not even an afterthought. It's like, this is what's going to happen. Right. And so that's important, I think, is in order to believe, you have to understand what makes you believe in what you want to accomplish, and pinpointing that is a huge step into like making sustainable growth and success and good performance for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most appealing things about you, before I got to know you, watching you as a competitor, watching you compete on and off the mat, I think that one of the most appealing things about you is your candor and your honesty in victory and defeat. Going back to your first NCAA title when I'm the captain now. I think, when I see that, it's like, you were just saying like that was a belief in yourself. I think that was a cool thing, but also, and that's kind of a funny thing in hindsight, but even after some of your losses, like the one thing that the level of respect I had for you is like in winning and defeat, you were always candid, you were always honest. And I appreciated that because we don't get that level of candor from many athletes. And I respect that about you.
Sometimes I'll go back and hear some of the things that I said when I was younger and like just like groan at myself. I'm like, oh. Sometimes like you can't help but feel a little embarrassed. But then I think back, like I didn't know any better. I just wanted to win. Like that kind of like control over the things you say and like maybe I shouldn't be that way came with more age and maturity for me. At the time, I was just trying to win and cause a wave and cause a ruckus. And but that was part of my journey, and that was important at the time into making myself believe that I could be the best. So, but yeah, sometimes I look back and I'm like, I think it's funny, but I was definitely a lot younger when I'd say things like that. But they were good, and I believed them. I believed what I was saying, so it was good. Yeah, and talking about the losses, like I never really took losses very hard. It was, if I lost and I actually tried, like that's something my dad always told me, right? Like he was never upset whenever I lost, and it would actually surprise me because he was super hard on me. I'm sure like every other good wrestler's dad, they were hard on them, right? But when I would lose, like it was never a bad thing. You just like if you did your best, and we would move forward. And that's something that I do now, right? Because I know within myself, I always try to win matches. I'll never go out there and not try to win and not try to give my best. Now, if I could, sometimes maybe my best doesn't get pulled out, but I will always try to pull that best out of me. And so when I lose, yeah, it's devastating, but it never makes me question who I am and like why I do this. So yeah, taking losses they're hard, but they're not. I think some guys when they lose, it's so devastating for them, and I never really understood that, and because I never felt that way. Like when I lost, like when I lose, I'm like, man, that guy really, he's really good, and he kind of, why did I like think about why I lost, not like, oh, I'm so bad because I lost. I'm like trying to think about why that happened and like analyze it and, not question who I am. And I see a lot of guys do that, and it really kind of bums me out a little. I'm like, why do they do that? Like that's so detrimental to like yourself.
And one of the things you mentioned, you talked about your dad there for a second, and when we were talking a couple months ago, you said we were talking about the principles that he instilled in you, and there's two things that he said that stuck with me. That he's like, this is how you have to live your life, Isaiah. And they were simple but profound. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'll let you talk about it. But I think that was kind of like the platform and the foundation he gave you the freedom to live your life the way you live it now and have that freedom to compete. And so let's talk about those two things because I think they're so formative to who you are.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, is it appropriate? Or
Yeah.
like,
yeah. I mean,
okay. So he would say, you have two things. A man has two things in this world, and I don't want to offend anybody, but he said you have your balls and you have your word, and those are the only things you have. So live your, like, make the decisions and own them, and be accountable to who you are. Right. Keep your word and be bold. Right. And that's kind of something that stuck with me. And I guess those are two. Looking back, like, sometimes I would let one thing take over the other, but I try to keep a good balance now. But yeah, those were, as crude as it sounds, that's very important to me.
Well, I think when I look at you just in your wrestling, Isaiah, that's what your wrestling is. It's completely honest. It's completely open, and it's the ballsiest thing I've ever seen. I mean, there's no fear when you go out there, and it's like, hey, let's fight, let's scrap. And I love that freedom, and I love that honesty in your expression when you compete. And I think that's what's so appealing about you.
Yeah, and also that's kind of how I was raised, right? It's you shoot first and ask questions later, right? You attack and you attack and you attack some more and you're aggressive. And you may pay the price, but you'd rather go down that way than on your heels, or not taking your shot. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I've kind of had to reel that in, though, make better decisions, and as I've gotten older. But yeah, I still try to do that. That's my best path to victory, and so that's what I have to do. You just gotta just kind of scrap. You gotta brawl, and you gotta get in there, and you got to force those wrestling situations, and that's always what's worked out best for me.
Yeah, and I think most kids at a young age, like, I bet looking back, that one of the best things for your wrestling is, like you said, learning how to shoot the shot. So many people there's a freedom in that. It's just instinct. I got to shoot the shot. I go out and shoot the shot, and then through maturity, and like you said, sometimes those characteristics, one gets ahead of the other as far as how you're driving your wrestling and your motivation. But that comes with maturity. That now you have a balance between the two, and you know where you have to put one in front of the other and vice versa. But there's probably a maturity to that approach. But you never would have had that unless you shoot the shot. And that approach is never going to change, right? You're always going to shoot the shot, but you do it in a more refined, mature way.
Yeah. Again, just learning to attack first is important at a young age. You just create so much more opportunities for yourself when you attack, right? It's much easier to learn elite level defense than it is to learn it's much easier to do defense than elite offense, right? If you don't ever learn how to shoot or attack, the older you get, the harder it becomes to learn to do it then, right? So learning to attack early just gives you that opportunity to kind of work on that. And it's funny, it's funny how I bet you a lot of wrestlers would agree with me on this, and it's funny how you still do the same moves you did when you were 8 years old as when you were 20, 21, 22, 23, right? Like, I remember hitting moves at 7 years old that I'll still do now, right? Not specifically the same kind of way, but they're the same moves. Just they've been refined over time, right? And you've added to your game, and it's changed a little bit, but I could still remember doing, my underhook stuff, an underhook to a high crotch or an outside step, when I was younger. I didn't really know it was an outside step. It was just kind of a more natural movement for me. But yeah, or you do short offense stuff, and you remember doing this when you were a kid, and you still do them now. I find that fascinating. Just how it evolves, but you still, the bones are still there, the framework is still there, and you kind of lay that at a younger age, right? And I think that's, again, just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we hear senior level athletes talk, we hear a lot of times they're like, I'm adding to my game. I'm adding to my arsenal. I'm putting new tools in the toolbox. But I think most people think you're learning a completely different move. And to your point, it's more of a refinement of the move. That's how you're adding to your arsenal of is actually refining what you already know. And most guys would tell you that, like, actually, the higher I go, the less I do, but the more I have to perfect it. Right.
Yeah. I think that like the higher level you get, the more the nuance becomes in like the positions. Like you see things like since I've gotten to the senior level and kind of jump more and more levels, wrestling has become a lot slower to me. And I know it's kind of weird to say, like, I slowed down my wrestling and I see things slower now and I try to approach them a little bit slower, and they've gotten like better. But like but when you would watch it, like it's like split second fast. But the way I look at it now, like wrestling it's gotten slower, and you have to see you just fine tune that like feel. Like you can close your eyes and like feel a position. If you've been doing it for a certain amount of time, and the higher level you get, and the more time you spend on that, whatever it may be, right? And it becomes like second nature, and you get to really understand the intricacies of a position, especially at the senior level where you have more time and you have more time for development and things like that. Like it just gets more and more refined, and it doesn't ever stop getting more refined.
Yeah, it in essence, like when it comes to wrestling, you're a supercomputer. You've spent a lifetime in this sport, and it's almost like how you can process information. You've put so much in, you've loaded so much data into the computer that you learn how to process it more and more quickly. It's like the evolution of the speed on the iPhones and everything, right? Like the more experience, the more reps, and the more refined reps in specific certain minute situations, it helps you process it so much quicker in the moment. And yeah, right.
Yeah, you just like exactly like you said, you've taken, you kind of are like a computer a little bit. You go try something, you take in the data, right? Like what happens, that's your data. Like how did it feel? That's your data. Like did it feel right? Did you score? Like you take in all this information and you go back and tweak it. And then you take back the information you get from that and you do it over and over and over, and then, when it does come that time, it's like just so quick, and like you could process situations and information so fast. And again, I think that is really fascinating too. Like, cause I've started thinking about that more and more. Like the taking in data and like refining that and how that affects your like understanding of positions, and like what are the results of that when you actually go out there and wrestle, right? And you're exactly right. Like the more data you take in and the more experience you get from those situations, the faster you're able to recognize and like act on those situations.
And then a form of that is actually a form of analytics, right? Like, okay, based upon all this information, this is where I need to be at what time and how often I need to get there. These are the situations I need to get away from. And so if I put myself in there, I got to remove myself and place myself back in my maximum opportunity, right? And so there's discipline in that processing too. It's like, where the danger zones are, and you can feel them and you can sense them before they even get there.
Yeah, you could just feel it, right? Like feel it and then move, feel it and then move, feel it and then go, right? And so it really does work like that. And I'm sure there's people who are much smarter than me could tell me exactly why that happens, like why you could recognize patterns so fast, and what's the process behind that. But it's really important, right? Like fine tuning that like recognition of positions. Like fine-tuning your like decision making in those moments, like, and it just only comes from repetition and filling in, like filling it out and trying it over and over and over, failing most of the time until you don't, right? You fail until you kind of don't. So I mean, it's fascinating. I wish someone could explain it to me, like into like a technical way, but I just know that that's kind of what happens.
Well, I think in the past, like when I was coming through and competing, people just kind of referenced that as being in the zone. And it was kind of like an intangible thing that people had a hard time defining. And I think the more involved that we've gotten into this and more of the scientific approach that we've applied to sports, it's kind of looking like at Michael Jordan. And I was watching The Last Dance. I don't know if you've seen that yet, part 1 and 2, but it really focuses on, we look at Michael Jordan, and he is a guy, how is he able to replicate this high level performance seemingly at will? But I think it's all the things that you were talking about. It's like when you put so much emphasis and put so much mental energy into understanding all the little situations and processing it over and over, like you can actually control it. It seems weird, but it almost seems like you can control the environment when you're in it. And it's a weird thing to think about, because you're actually talking about, no, I can actually control the guy across from me because I know him so well and I can see his reactions before he even pulls the trigger, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you just get so much information, like, and you said it perfectly. You put in the mental energy into your wrestling, and eventually you're capable of doing those things, right? You understand exactly what is ideal for you in a wrestling match, a wrestling position, where your hands are, everything, right? You know what you want and you know what you're looking for, and you know how to replicate it. And that comes from putting that mental energy into wrestling, thinking about, where do I want to be? Why do I want to be there? How do I get there? How do I continue to get there? And you break it down like in every position of your wrestling. And it, again, like it refines it and fine tunes it. And you start seeing the game a lot slower.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And yeah, it is about putting that mental energy into your wrestling. It's hard to go about it that way, because wrestling is so physically a physical sport, in the sense that, like, you got to work on the physical. Like that's the like status quo, right? Is the physical, like how, like, a lot of times in wrestling we gauge how good of a wrestler you are by how long it takes you to get tired, right? Not how well you actually understand wrestling.
Yeah.
Or how well you understand how to wrestle, or how you wrestle, right? And I think that's, they're both important. One allows you to be able to stand up after a match is over and not die of a heart attack. But the other one makes you a good wrestler. Like, you understand wrestling. When you understand wrestling, that never goes away, right? Your physical abilities will always go away. But if you don't put that like mental energy into wrestling, what's it for? If you don't actually understand what wrestling is and like those positions, like, it doesn't really mean anything. And that's really important to me now, is really trying to understand wrestling positions, understand myself and where I want to be when I'm wrestling, right? And so I think they're both important, and they both make you good wrestlers, and they're both going to help you win matches. But you gotta have both if you want to be like the best,
Yeah,
I guess, or a champion or whatever.
I think at the highest levels, it's critical. I think at age group levels, you can get away with maybe one or the other. But at this level, you can't hide anything. I mean, you're going to get exposed. If you're trying to protect or hide something, you're going to get exposed, no doubt.
Yeah. I mean, that's wrestling in a nutshell, right? It's it will never like not humble you eventually. You will always be humbled in a sport like wrestling, right? Because you're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna get old, or you're gonna sheer luck, a bad luck one day, you don't feel good. You're gonna get humbled in the sport, and it's unfortunate, but that's just how it is. We chose to be in this game, and we do it because we know it's good for us, and we love it, and you have a passion for it, and you wouldn't want to do anything else.
Yeah. Well, hey, I wanted to shift gears here in the last couple minutes of the episode, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm going to ask you anyways. There's some talk last week on Flo. There's some chatter between Burroughs and Dake, and I think that the fallout and the aftermath of that, of what actually happened, is I wanted to get your take, because these are obviously two guys you're probably going to face, to make the team. I mean, that's a plan. I know some guys don't want to talk about other people, but these are two guys that you're most likely going to have to face to achieve your goal of making the team. And I know this doesn't have to do a lot with the wrestling of those two guys, but what was your takeaway from, what went down on Flo last week between those two guys?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I mean, my initial thoughts as a competitor is like, good. Good. They already think that they're in the final. Or JB is in the finals, right? He's waiting. Kyle thinks, but everyone's just kind of putting it as an afterthought that these guys are going to be wrestling for the Olympic spot, right? And I'm over here. I'm sitting over here. You know how close I was to making a team, right? I know how good I am, and if they're ignoring me, then even better, right? Yeah. Because that gives me an advantage, right? But also, I know the kind of competitors they are. They're definitely not. They definitely know that it's going to be extremely difficult, and there's more than just two guys at the weight class, right? So those were my thoughts as a competitor. I mean, good if they're ignoring me, good. That doesn't change my belief in my abilities and what I want to do, and it even gives me an advantage. If you're overconfident, that's probably the worst thing you could do in wrestling, is be overconfident and not pay attention to what is actually going on. So, as a competitor, that's where my mind was. As a fan, it was entertaining, right? It was entertaining, and I thought it was fake, but I'm hearing it wasn't. I hope it was fake. I hope it was staged, because, again, if I was JB, I probably would never go back on a Flo podcast ever again. Because he's a professional. We're professionals, and you don't go on a show to get surprise attacked, right? I would be super upset if they did that and I didn't know, right? It's incredible. I thought it was really unprofessional if that was really a surprise. So I'm hoping it was staged.
Yeah, I was talking about it the other day with Jason Bryan on the show, and that was my thing. If it was real, and I think it was from talking to different people, I think it was. I just thought it was, a guy like Jordan Burroughs, who's done so much, and I know you want to beat him more than anything, but I know the level of respect that you have for the guy because of what he's accomplished, and he kind of knocked down the door for a lot of Americans, as far as if we go back to levels of belief about what we can accomplish on the senior level as the United States. A decade ago, he kind of reestablished that level of belief. So I know the level of respect that you have, mm-hmm. but I also know how much you want to beat him. And my take, and this is what I told to Jason, was you don't disrespect a guy like that for sheer entertainment value. If he was in on it, that's my thing, Isaiah. If he was in on it and it was staged, hey, I have no problem with it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't think you can't blindside one of the greats of all time like that just for entertainment value.
Yeah, I mean, Dake said because I watched it and I was like, I'm just watching it like in amazement, like listening to the things that they're saying. He's like, I could see your cortisol levels rising. I'm like, yeah, his cortisol levels are rising. He's in an open confrontation with someone who surprised him and someone who, you know, is a threat to what he has, right? Like, yeah, if your cortisol levels are not rising by seeing, you know, your opponent a little bit, then you don't really view him as an opponent, right? You don't take it that seriously, right? Like, of course your cortisol levels are gonna rise. Like, I thought that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But like I said, I hope it was fake. And it just sets a bad precedence for like the way they think about entertainment in wrestling. Like, yeah, it's good for it. Like, that conversation was good for interest and like hype, and it's boring right now and people want to see things like that. But at the same time, you know, we are professionals, and it was a little bit of an overstepping of boundaries, right? And like I said, if I was him, I would never go on again, right? But, you know, that's just my take on it. With that being said, I still really enjoyed it, right? Because who doesn't like drama? Like, yeah, I'm conflicted on this because, like, it was awesome to see. But I'm also an athlete, and I know how I would feel in that situation. And that's one of the things that people don't realize. Like, how would you feel if that happened to you and you didn't know that was happening? I'd be pissed. I'd be very upset. And if it happened to me, I'd be very like confrontational. I think I'm pretty good in an argument, but some people don't feel that way. And some people don't feel that way, you know, especially if they don't know it's coming. Like, it's crazy to me that would happen.
Well, it's like, this is probably a weird analogy, but it's like, hey, Isaiah, do you want to come to dinner tonight? And then when you show up to dinner and I invite your ex-girlfriend over, right? And you're like, oh, what the, like, wait.
You bet my cortisol levels would be rising.
Yeah. So I think it's one of those things. If it wasn't staged, that's the thing. Like, hey, when you're being brought into an interview or onto a show with a certain understanding, and then they're like, oh no, we're changing topics. I'm like, wait. I'll still talk about it. And I think Burroughs probably might have talked about it if they said, hey, Dake's going to come on here, and I know we're probably going to talk about folk style 165, but it's probably going to devolve into something else. But it didn't seem like that was the case. And I'm like, I wouldn't have wanted to walk into that house fire.
Absolutely, it was going to devolve into like mudslinging for sure. Like, how could it not? And like, that's also part of the entertainment value. Is like, you know, Ben knew this was going to happen. Ben knew they weren't going to stay on topic, and they were going to talk about the matches. And yeah, I mean, it was entertaining to watch. But
because it's kind of like what you were saying, Isaiah. Like, to your younger self, I'm like learning how to balance and say things, but you get thrust in an emotional situation with one of your competitors. Yeah, you will revert back to some of your previous iterations of yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, Dake was pretty harsh, and if I was JB, I would have been way harsher. But like, that's just me and my argumentative style. When I'm really threatened, I guess, or emotional, like, I probably would have said something 10 times worse. I don't know, like, but that's just me. Yeah, it was definitely a spectacle.
Yeah. Anyways, well, hey, Isaiah, I appreciate you taking your time out of your day. Look forward to catching up with you in person here in the near future, and wish you nothing but the best. You know, we're a big fan. Obviously, we're big fans of you. We love what you're about. We love what you stand for, and we wouldn't want anybody else representing our brand than you. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, Isaiah, we'll see you.